All right. Why don't we start off with the presentation? So I can turn it over to Susan.
Okay. Is it, you guys still have it there? There we go. Thank you very much for inviting us. I'm Susan Reider, and this is my husband, Robert Wasserstrom. And I see some familiar faces here. We are, of course, very active Democrats, and we're glad to be here to talk to you this evening about a really important, what we believe is a very important public policy issue, as well as an issue that's really important to our community, and that is housing, and specifically workforce housing. Rob and I both became involved, and Rob, I'm going to advance this a little bit. This isn't advancing.
You have to click the slideshow thing in the corner again.
Sorry. Where's my cursor?
Maybe it's this.
Okay, here we go.
Down arrow.
All right. Rob and I both got involved in this issue in 2021, when Vicky Dudera actually convened a group of people, a real grassroots, open, kind of a forum on housing in Knox County, and we participated in that. And the Camden Rotary Club, which we're also members of, also decided to get involved in this issue. And eventually, after lots of discussion, we decided to form a housing trust. And we decided to focus on the missing middle, is what we call it, of working households. People who really can't find a place to live. They don't qualify for any vouchers or any other public funding, and they aren't wealthy enough to buy into the current housing market in Knox County. So those are the people who are teachers, police, healthcare workers, we know skilled tradesmen, all the people we need in our community to keep it going, but are having a hard time finding a place to live here. We also, frankly, decided to focus on this particular segment of the population because of the presence of the Knox County Homeless Coalition and Habitat for Humanity, both of who are doing a fabulous job of working with people, at the other end of the
lower end of the scale,
the lower end of the income scale. And we didn't certainly want to, tread any toes there. So, again, we're talking about workforce housing. We formed an organization, a housing trust, and we have a small board. It's housing advocates, business leaders, housing experts, and Penny. Penny Beebe Center is on our board. We're tax exempt, and we're now searching for projects in Rockland. You may remember that a while ago, I guess it was maybe 6 months ago, the Rockland City Council designated the Midcoast Regional Housing Trust as an essential partner in dealing with the housing crisis in Rockland. And we're trying to find property there so that we can actually, have that happen. Can you advance that again?
Mm-hmm.
So you might say, what is a housing trust and what exactly makes this happen? Well, the concept was created in Burlington, Vermont in the 1970s. And Bernie Sanders and John Davis, who was his housing manager or housing director when Bernie was mayor, came up with this concept of community land trust or housing trust. It's the same concept. And basically what it does is it ensures perpetual affordability through deed restrictions and land lease covenants. So the trust, which is a nonprofit organization, holds in perpetuity the land, and the house or the rental apartment, it can be either way, can have various tenants or owners, but it stays in the control of the trust in perpetuity. So in the case of a house that's being sold or for a homeowner, the shared equity model comes into play, where somebody buys in and the trust still owns the land. When they move, when they leave, the trust has saved a share of their payment so that they can then use that as their equity and start and then hopefully get into the commercial real estate market. Most of the value of the property, assuming that it rises, and of course it usually does, is retained by the trust as a subsidy for the next owner. so that it keeps this property going in perpetuity. And that one benefit of it is, and we believe it's a benefit, is that housing trusts want to build or renovate properties that will last for a long time. So we're looking at, really good quality construction, really well maintained. We really want to see this property is going to have to be there for, usually we have a 99-year lease model. So it's going to have to be there for 100 years. So that's something that's really important to us. And the other important factor to note, which will come up later in this discussion, is that no public funding is available for workforce housing. Most housing that's available either through vouchers to people who want to live in it or to builders is aimed at a different demographic. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But housing trusts and community land trusts have caught on, and there are now hundreds of them all over the country. And there are lots more here in Maine that you may or may not know about. The Island Housing Trust in Mount Desert Island, Waterville Community Land Trust, Kennebunkport Heritage Housing Trust, North Haven Sustainable Housing, Freeport, Deer Isle, Greater Portland, Covenant in Orland, and Greater Booth Bay. So there are lots of other ones aside from us, and they're all, we're all dealing with kinds of the same issues. And now I want to turn over to Rob, who did a needs assessment last year and can talk a little bit about exactly what's going on in Knox County and what we need to do here.
And before I go into this slightly overcomplicated chart, I just want to say, if there's anything you don't understand about my presentation, you can blame it on my dog because she's licking my leg. So what does affordability mean? Well, there's a legal definition of affordability that all of the housing agencies in the country, including Maine Housing, which we're going to talk about a lot in the next few minutes, use. And that is that affordable money for affordable housing, public money for affordable housing, is available to people who earn 60% of area median income or below. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development sets and calculates an affordable, an area median income for every county in the country, and then public money available for housing is available only, with a couple of exceptions, but only for people who earn up to 60% of that. So the area median income that we've been working with until now has been $72,000 for Knox County. I saw a recent HUD sort of semi-announcement that they were going to raise that to $76,000 for a family of 4. And so that's the number I put in this chart. So presumably for the next year or two, our area median income will be $76,000, and 60% of that to make you eligible for any of Maine Housing's programs in Maine or federal money in Maine, with the exception of one program, is at 60% of that, and 60% of that is $45,000. So if a family of 4, which would generally be 2 or 1.5 earners, workers, is earning more than 60%, then they're ineligible for vouchers, and builders are ineligible to rent or build for them or sell a house to them. Now, at the moment, so just to simplify this chart a little bit, we have real estate people on our board, and we're in contact with the real estate community in Rockland in particular, because it's the epicenter of it's the economic epicenter of Knox County. And at the moment, the market rate for a semi-decent apartment in Rockland for a family of 4 is about $2,000 a month. It was $1,800 a few months ago. It's gone to $2,000. It's beginning to creep up toward $2,200. So if you look now, if you if you look at that family of family of four earning 45,000, that's one wage earner, say a policeman or an EMT. The starting salary in most of the school districts around here is about 45,000. That person is earning 60%. This is the last column on the right, is earning 60% of the cost of the apartment, right? And so by the time you get to by the time you're able to pay that $2,000 a month rent, you're somewhere between 75 and 85. You can see that in that column that you don't hit that 2,000 mark until somewhere. So that's two teachers, for example, two young teachers in the school system. It's a cop and an LPN working at the hospital. It's a lot of the people we need in our community, but they're disqualified by income for for assistance, and we as developers are disqualified for taking main housing money and building something that they can live in.
I have to say one point here.
Oh yeah.
Well, what I think is interesting is, that the definition of affordability is that you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on a mortgage payment or rent and utilities and the other costs associated with housing. But we know so many people in this community spend way more than 30% of their household income on housing. And that's a real problem. That's a real problem. That's a real societal problem. And, it kind of restricts this public attitude toward, well, you can only spend 30% to make it affordable is, a good concept in one way, but in another way, it really kind of degrades the access of a lot of people because they're spending way more than that and they don't qualify for any help. So that's a problem. Go ahead.
I was going to say that the reason why one of the reasons, as Susan mentioned, one of the reasons why we're focusing on what we call the missing middle, which are those people who are essential to the community but can't afford to live here, is that if you look at one of the other things that this chart tells you is that Knox County Homeless Coalition and other organizations are really trying to address the population from 60% and below. In fact, Knox County Homeless Coalition focuses on people who generally earn, when they have money, in the 30% of AMI, of area median income or below. So we made a conscious decision that we would not compete with those organizations to serve that population. But unfortunately, that has put us in a position where we can't get much public money, and we have to rely mainly for our fundraising on private donors. Private donors are wealthy individuals. So as an aside there. In January last year, a year ago January, we completed a needs assessment of housing in Knox County. It's actually Knox County and adjacent townships. So our hypothetical service territory within 35 minutes commuting distance of Rockland extends from Northport to Waldoboro. So we're actually in pieces, all of Knox County and pieces of the adjacent county. So based on the American Community Survey, which is a Census Bureau study that's done every 5 years, we learned that 30% of our housing, this is in 2021, 30% of our housing stock is seasonally occupied. A third of our housing stock is not available for year-round residents at any price. The median price of a home in Knox County now, right now, oscillates between $375 and $410, and depending on what comes on the market. So there's no real. It's not that it's going up from $375 to $410. It might be median price this month might be $410, next month might be $390 or whatever. It's in that band, and it's But the main thing to notice, of course, is that it's not going down. If you actually do the calculation of who afford to buy $375,000 house with a 20% cash down payment and all the things that home ownership requires, that family income needs to be in the 120 to 150 range, and that eliminates most of the missing middle that we're talking about. Right now, here's the bad news. It's the last line there. According to the Maine Department of Labor, our county is going to need 800 new workers by 2028 just to make up for retirements, mostly from the school districts, but also from other employers. And at the same time, when we interview employers, they tell us that 25% of the potential new hires who meet their qualifications and their needs are turning down competitive offers, competitive with jobs that are being offered in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, wherever, because they can't find a place to live. And in some cases, they call back, they accept the offer and call back and say, I tried for 3 weeks and I'm sorry, I can't come. And that's just to keep the workforce we have. That's assuming no population growth, but more, I think, significantly, no economic growth in our region. Now, informally, we've learned from the real estate community that that figure of 30% of seasonal occupancy is actually almost, in their experience, and actually finding tenants and handling properties, they believe that it's closer to 40%. So that would be a 30 to 40% in the last 2 years. And here's the thing that really that's sort of where the rubber meets the road. New construction in Knox County and adjacent areas has hit almost zero, except for the highest price ranges. So if you want to build a $2 million or a $3 million house, you can get on the list of local builders. There's a 2 to 3 year wait, depending on which builder you get. But you can get on the list. But construction costs are now running between $350 and $500 per square foot. Now, think of, in our position, trying to build housing for young working families who are earning more than $45,000 a year. 1,000 square foot living space, whether it's an apartment or a house, is going to cost us $350,000 to build. How many of those can we build without support from the state or the federal government? And as we mentioned, a livable 2-bedroom apartment in Rockland is now up at $2,000, possibly even $2,200. I haven't seen the latest figures. So this year is the year of housing in the Maine legislature, as you probably know from reading the newspaper. I checked yesterday, and I counted at least 12 housing bills that are now working their way through one of the 3 committees that deals with housing. There's an organization called the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition, which represents the builders and of affordable housing. That's the 60% of AMI and below housing, right? There are several big builders in Maine that specialize that, or at least do part of it. And they have this trade group called the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition, and all of us are involved in it, or members of it. Maine Affordable Housing Coalition is supporting several of these bills that would expand the amount of money involved, and in some cases even raise eligibility to families earning 60 or 80% of AMI. We are, of course, supporting the same bills as the Maine Housing Coalition, Affordable Housing Coalition, but in addition, we are doing one more thing, which is that we're trying to educate the legislature, hopefully for this session, or maybe it's not this year, but next year or the year after, that for current funds, pushing more money through Maine Housing under its current rules is not going to do much for the kind of families we need to retain in the rest of Maine. And so we're trying to make the case in our testimony and every opportunity we get that the legislature and Maine Housing, which is the agency that's going to get the funding, will address the issues of workforce retention and workforce housing to quote one of our local representatives whose name will remain anonymous, Maine outside of Cumberland County, right? So we're also trying we're advocating that the legislature should dedicate a percentage of funds to the Midcoast and other rural areas. And some funding should go to housing trusts like ours and not just to put out for bid, available to the nonprofit builders who specialize in the 60% and below housing. They're doing the Lord's work. We certainly cannot address this problem without them, but they're heavily concentrated in the high population areas and have virtually no presence in the rest of Maine. So what are we asking you to do? Well, Ann Matlack and Valerie Geiger are on 2 of the 3 committees that deal with housing, and they have been and they are both very strong advocates of housing. Vicky and Penny are not on any of those committees, but they've been very supportive. Vicky was one of our founders. So we're asking you to contact them in support of the legislation. And if you want more specific ideas about what legislation to support or what to ask them to support, you can send a message to us at info@mcrht.org, and I'd be happy to send you back copies of the bills, previous testimony, or anything else you'd like. Susan, do you want to finish the last?
Well, sure. That's one thing you can do, just basically the usual advocacy stuff, send them an email or something, saying this is really an important issue and really need to deal with it. And it's important for Democrats to support housing because it's good for our economy and it's good for our state and it's good for our communities. Local elected officials, if we need to keep beating that drum with them, they've got to do something. They've got to do something. They, move it up the agenda. We need that because they could partner with organizations like ours or Habitat, or they could do more if they could just need a little more adrenaline. I'm sure we're trying to get them interested in doing more with us. Sign up for our newsletter. Go to our website, mcrht.org, and you'll see what we have to say there, and you can sign up for a newsletter. We're going to send it. It's going out periodically and just keeping people up to date with what's going on about housing in our organization. And if you'd like to get more involved, we have community advisors. If you have good communication skills, expertise in social media, website stuff, that kind of thing, we're always looking for help with that. If you're knowledgeable about housing, zoning, development, construction, and really want to get involved, we're always looking for good board members. If you have resources, we're always, of a property or you want to donate one. We're always looking for funding and properties, and we're just trying to, communicate to the community every chance we can about this issue and what we're trying to do about it and to get more people galvanized. So that's pretty much all I have. And if anybody has any questions, that'll be a great time. Yeah, Amy, hi.
Amy, you're muted.
can you repeat the info at just quickly? Info at, is it MCHRHT?
MCRHT.
Oh, RHT, MCRH. Yeah, got it. Okay. Is there any way to figure out about so many places? I just heard that someone in Rockland owns 5 properties on this street, and 4 of them are going to Airbnb. And I'm like, Airbnb? I mean, we need housing here. That's like taking housing off the market. And I just feel like there's got to be some way to, especially if there's funding involved here, that people should be thinking outside the box in a new way instead of just about all income, helping us to bring workers here and have a place to live. So I commend your whole idea and thank you for the presentation, but that was just one thought, just how many people are doing Airbnb, which eliminates housing?
Well, they're in that 30 to 40% of our housing inventory that's not available for year round. So I could actually go back to the American Community Survey and probably see how many of those are Airbnb versus people from away who own a place and just come for 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Those are the 2 categories that are counted in that
Okay.
unavailable professional occupancy.
On just a personal note, I have to say, you know, we have a ADU here on our property. We bought this place and it has an apartment over the barn. And, you know, we were talked into doing seasonal rentals at first, and we tried that, and it just, you know, I mean, it just wasn't that great. And then there's the management of the people, and I guess if you're from away and you hire a management company, they can do that. But frankly, we found it to be much, as living here, as people who actually live in this community, I would say to anybody who does that or is thinking of doing it, it's much, much better to rent full-time year-round to somebody who lives in this community, who has invested in this community, who you know, and frankly is going to make a contribution to this community. Rent isn't going to be, frankly, if you look at your annual income, it isn't going to be that different. The upkeep of a short-term property is significant, and all the other attendant stuff that goes along with it. I would argue against it. I mean, I know there's been some discussion of limiting the number of Airbnb or seasonal rentals in communities all around Knox County. That's kind of up to local government to figure out how to handle that. I know there's a lot of pressure in both directions, but I personally would just make myself out there and say, if you are renting part-time or just seasonal and think you're making more money, really do the numbers and think about charging fair, not exorbitant, fair rent to a year-round person who's going to be invested in this community. And it's just going to be better for you, and it's going to be better for the whole community. And I would do it that way.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. I agree.
Right.
Can I just say, it's pretty easy to figure out what's fair, because it's 30% of a household's income. And so if, you know, you have a teacher who shows up or whatever, you can come pretty close to what a fair rent would be, even though you could make 3 times that for 10 weeks.
But no, see, you can make 3 times that for 10 weeks, but that doesn't, if you look at it on an annual basis,
Right.
it's not that great.
It's not that great.
Yeah, it's just.
And it's a pain in the neck. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
All right.
I had a question of, I think you did a great job explaining the problem and throughout that, but I don't have a good idea of how you're saving people money. How are you getting someone into a home? You haven't explained that very well. So I understand if you're gifted a dwelling or something, then that's going to be how do you take a $400,000 house and make it more affordable for somebody? That's my question.
Yeah, well, that's our question too. That is the $64 million question right now. All of those other housing trusts on Susan's first slide, there are 10 housing trusts on the coast of Maine and a bunch that are in other parts of Maine. So maybe 20 in all. All the other ones on the coast has started either with a wealthy individual who, or group of individuals who contributed money, or people who donated land or properties. We have neither one of those. And so what we're doing now is looking for sort of rifle shot opportunities in or close to Rockland. And we've actually, people have come to us with ideas. People who own land or properties and have it and would like to do something for the housing market. And we figure that if we can get something going, if we can get a half a dozen units built, then you start to get cash flow, and you can actually use the cash flow for subsequent ventures. Building from scratch is out of the question, right? We can't, at $350 a square foot, we're not going to be able to do that. So we have to look for existing buildings or properties, or someone who'll donate. And that's where we are right now. I mean, when we started this, the cost of construction was half of what it is now. So will the world look different?
So you're following like a land trust type of thing of like somebody, you acquire land or property
Right.
via the goodwill of the community or members
Right.
of the land trust, right? And then
Yes.
you in this case you want to turn around and sort of do a somewhat of a sale, that a sale to somebody,
Well,
but with restrictions, right? Of some
with
kind.
the restrictions, yeah. So there are two. So it's interesting you mentioned land trust. So some other organizations, other housing trusts on the coast, have worked with land trusts and actually partnered with them and gotten land. So someone will donate some land to a land trust. We actually have this year in Camden. Donate more land than the land trust wants to conserve or feel is valuable. And so with the, as long as there's no restriction in the donation of the land, it's possible that the land trust would allow us, would cede some of that land to us, land that's not really worth conserving, land that's already on road frontage and whatever. And we could then go about trying to raise money for construction, which I think we could probably get if we had an actual project. But the suitability of the land, I mean, I think the first parcel that we talked about was going to be very difficult to build on. So, we're not in a position to do that now. But it's a possibility out there. The MDI and Deer Isle have both had a lot of success partnering with land trusts and taking that piece of land, taking a chunk of a donation that the land trust doesn't want, and then raising money privately to build on it. Yes, it's a charitable venture.
Rob, I have a question. I guess I'm trying to wrap my brain around how this works from the financial standpoint. If you were not gifted something, is there ever a case, I guess, where there is a mortgage involved that is the trust is then working with the occupant of the house to
Yes.
manage that?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the sale, in the scenario where you have where we build something, or we were donated a house and we can renovate it and then put it on the market. the buyer applies for a mortgage. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac already have rules for underwriting mortgages with a 99-year land lease below them. So they're familiar with that model, right? They don't need the owner of the structure to own the land.
Banks also are familiar with that,
Yep.
and very comfortable with that.
They're on our board, or in the community advisor. And so that part of it is going to, I don't think is going to be a problem, but I think the problem is now just finding the right property to start with. I will say that a couple of the most successful land trusts, housing trusts in Maine started out with a couple of them started out with large, monetary donations, but some of them just started out with support from local government. I mean, Freeport has 187 units, and they started out with a $500,000 grant, essentially, that they got from the local government, which was a fee, which was a donation from a developer who wanted permission to build a big parking lot somewhere. And in exchange for giving him that permission,
It's called a land swap.
it's a land swap. He underwrote the formation of a housing trust that provided an equivalent amount of housing to what could have been built on the land that they were letting him pave over.
You also mentioned that this model would conceivably work for apartments as
Yes.
well. How would that look like? Because someone else is the owner of the apartment building. So how does that work?
We would own the apartment building. The trust would own the apartment building. And then actually, it's kind of an attractive, that is more attractive for us to get started because we have cash flow through the rent payments every month. And that would put us in a good position to keep expanding. We would set aside some of the rent payments for people when they move out, but the most of that would go in, would not only subsidize the mortgage on that property, but also hopefully acquisition of another property. So that's something we're looking at. If we could find the right property, maybe it's an existing apartment building or a building that could be a commercial building that be converted to apartments, that would be really attractive to us.
So to give you an example, we, along with probably every other developer in the Midcoast, have our eye on the McLean School. If it's reconverted to residential use. And even the Lincoln Street School could be a prospect, although it's currently in use. And that would be a very divisive thing to do. But McLean School would be a great opportunity. Once we did, if we prepare the winning bid, because it's going to go to bid. We prepare the winning bid, I think that actually getting the money will not be that hard because we can, there's people who are a lot smarter than me on our board who say that they think they could do it.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Mary Jo. I wondered when the renters leave the apartment, you said they get some of the money back, maybe used towards equity for a home after that. Is that correct?
I was wrong. I was just told I was wrong. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
In the case of a sale,
Oh,
if with a homeowner,
okay.
typically in Maine, other housing trusts in Maine, the owner walks away with about 25% of the upside and the rest of it is retained by the housing trust.
Okay.
But for renters, what we're trying to do for them is, we're going, if we get to that stage, and that's actually what we want to do first, we want to build or acquire rental properties. is just simply charge below, we're not going to charge $2,000. And so hopefully,
Affordable housing, yeah.
so hopefully the idea is that, if you meet our income qualification, then you'll take that, essentially that below market rate that we're charging, and you'll put it in the bank so that you can buy a house.
Right.
Right. And that's what we're going to be counseling people to do.
Got it. Terrific. Thank you.
So if somebody, how is somebody who's buying one of your homes, what's the incentive for them to work on that home and fix it up and maintain it if only 25% of that work is repaid to them somehow?
That's a really good, I was oversimplifying a little bit. So there are various formulas you can use, right? And the one that I like, since we don't have a house, we haven't really decided which one we're going to use, but the one that I would advocate for is that the improvements are, actually North Haven has this system right now. So the improvements do come out of the sale price. And then, so you get back your improvements, and then there's some percentage of the additional upside, if there's more upside, that's divided between the seller and the former owner and the trust. I favor the reimbursement of the improvements for that reason that you just said as incentive. NDI does not do that, and they've been very successful. They just say, okay, well, just know that you're going to get 25% or whatever that number is. I think it's about 25%. So keep your house in good shape, but don't expect to get back 100% of the improvements if you go over this number, which we believe is what the additional investment that your house can stand.
Based on fair market value.
Based on fair market value, yeah. So,
And so I'm sorry, is there no deposit that is paid when you go into one of the trust homes? So is that you just walk into the house and just pay payments every month, but you haven't had to put down a 20% deposit?
well, you've had to get a mortgage, so it's whatever the bank wants you to do, which is going to be 20%,
Okay.
20% plus blah, 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 right? So we're not a landlord anymore when they buy the house,
Okay.
but we have the right to, actually, there are two ways to structure it. One is it's possible to convert their obligation to us into effectively a second mortgage. So we become a second mortgage holder, or just simply, we own the land under the house. We have the right of first refusal. Right? So we can buy it back, and all those houses are always bought back.
So what you do can be combined with different beneficial financing structures.
Yeah.
I'm involved with the Genesis community development.
Oh,
I actually have loaned them X amount of dollars. Actually, it's actually a loan. So I loaned them X amount of dollars for 2%, and they in turn give it to somebody else at 3.5% or half the normal rate of a loan or something, and then it becomes a beneficial financing for somebody.
right.
And it's somewhat beneficial to me because I still get 2% or whatever if I deem that I want that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, we are working with Genesis. They're advising us. Main Housing has made them available to groups like ours to help us get going, to provide technical support. We're still we still have the problem of the 60% AMI and below qualification for main housing funds, because we're trying to help working families stay in Knox County or move here, and they're going to be making more than that income limitation that main housing has.
But you can still get some kind of creative financing above that, can't
We can,
you?
yeah. We can. I mean, there's some complicated stuff with the low income housing tax credit.
Yeah,
I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's kind of moot now because we don't have a property yet to go back to the lenders with.
okay.
Well, very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guys, thanks. Nice to see everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. That was